windshield, Autoglass America will fix it and give you up to $150 cash back to help pay holiday bills. With qualifying insurance, we'll come to you with mobile service and install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Get a great outlook on the new year with a new windshield and New Year's cash from Autoglass America. 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS.
With PatriotSoftware.com, accounting and payroll, keep your time and money.
Mike Capel here. A Neighbor's Choice is live. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you once again across Radio Land on FM and AM, as well as our podcast and video stream audience. So glad to have all of you here joining us together for another live broadcast. And we're going to have another great discussion because today, of course, the ritual that D.C. is engaged in continues unabated, despite the fact that people said, hey, it's time to let this go, guys. It's time to move on in terms of trying to scapegoat Trump once again in a scapegoat ritual to try to find meaning, to try to find binding and sense out of his purging. And yet it will fail, and it is failing in front of us right now. We have a society that is saying, hey, we have to be able to take care of the things that are most essential to our survival. Our ability to have wealth, our ability to have a job, our ability to have health, our ability to take care of our families. But that's not what we have when we listen to D.C. We see folks obsessed about purging Donald Trump from every facet of public life. Take him out of past movies he's been in, ban him from all social media platforms. And why are they doing that? Because they hate what they see when they look in the mirror. They hate what they see. They hate what they do. And they need to let you see that they're better than someone else, that somebody else is more wicked than them. And they have chosen their vessel of wrath, their vessel of guilt, to Donald Trump. That doesn't make him the good guy, like binary thinkers would like us to think. Okay, therefore that's the good team. Okay. No, we're not saying that. We're saying something more interesting than that. We're saying that they need Donald Trump. They need a heretic. They need a boogeyman. They can't survive without it. Their ritual demands a sacred aura with solemn reverence. Jack Posobiec of One America News says Democrats are now talking about how the group that led the riot wore earpieces and planned in advance, which completely destroys their entire premise of this impeachment. So apparently that's the latest thing, where they heard, or the Democrats are saying that they saw the group going into the Capitol and they were leading the way with earpieces and they had planning that was in advance. Now, how would that mean that his speech, Donald Trump's speech on January 6th, somehow incited them if this was something that the Democrats are saying themselves was planned in advance and was led by folks with earpieces? Doesn't make any sense, does it? Sounds like something that has no coherency. Sounds like something that people who are low information, people who want to vent hate onto their neighbor, could easily lap up, even if it doesn't have any logic or reason. Sounds like something that's a waste of time, but is of the ultimate importance to folks who believe that they themselves are gods, or at least high priests in a sacred revolutionary faith that DC represents. And that revolutionary faith is that if we put everything within the garb of victim concern, we can do horrible corporatism, wars without end, mass incarceration, grifting for the establishment, grifting for the rich, corrupt crony corporate welfare, all the stuff that Biden and Harris represent, that Obama represented, all the same corporate clown garbage. But if you do so in the name of victims, if you do so in the name of the last shall be first and the first shall be last, somehow they pat themselves on the back for a moment and they actually believe that they're doing something right, just for a moment. And then the facade always falls apart. But they desperately want the public to accept that they are the moral do-gooders. It's not enough just for them to come in and transactionally loot the public for the rich and the elite that the establishment and the media support. It's important for them, all of them, that they make you feel like they're doing it on your behalf, that they make you feel like they're doing it because they are truly the good people. And that's why they demand a solemn aura behind everything they do. MSNBC has a statement or a clip where Garrett Hake, I guess a reporter there with his little mask on around nobody, he's got his mask on in front of the camera trying to instill fear to the low information people that watch their programs. Nobody's around him. He's not going to cough on anybody. Probably 6 feet away from the camera. But he says on MSNBC, they tweeted that their reporter discusses how Senator Hawley's conduct on the second day of former President Trump's impeachment trial. He's been sitting with his legs up on the seat in front of him, essentially reading non-related material. Oh, the humanity, they cry. Oh, my goodness. This is not something they take lightly. This is essential. Whenever you're going to do a scapegoat ritual, if you understand anthropology, if you understand the history of tribes and human development, if you're going to do a scapegoat ritual, which is essential to the heart of politics, you have to get everybody to participate. You got to get everybody to take it solemnly. You can't have, if you're doing a ritual where you're going to scapegoat a goat out of the community and put all your sins onto the back of that goat and send it packing into the outer lands, and you have half the people putting their feet up on the seat while it's happening, reading books, listening to music, perhaps laughing at the whole ordeal, how do you think that's going to make the fundamentalist believers in the scapegoat ritual feel? How can they even believe in what they're trying to participate in and what they're trying to push if they don't get at least some level of token solemnity from everybody involved with the ritual? Do you see how this is important? Do you see how essential it is that they participate in being, oh, you must be solemn? Forget about Josh Hawley's politics. I probably disagree with him on a lot of stuff. In fact, I know I do, from what I've read. But the McWoke media, they're losing their mind because people aren't taking their embarrassing scapegoat ritual seriously. They're just yawning. This is the impotence of their grand aura. And don't ever forget how important their moral do-gooder, busybody aura is essential for their success. We are a Christ-haunted society. We're haunted by the cross of Christ. It infects our hearts, our consciences, even as we become atheists or so forth, whatever these little ideas people think they have, they borrowed from other people. We are thoroughly infected with the aesthetic and the ethic of what the cross represents. That the first shall be last, the last shall be first, that God stands on the side of our oppressed folks, that he stands on the side of those who we victimize and shun and purge. And so those who want to maintain cultural hegemony, it is essential for them that they mimic the aesthetic of the gospel in order to maintain their spot at the top of the hierarchy. Do you see how essential it is that they get you to buy into their narrative, that this is an essential purge? that Donald Trump supporters and other folks, like I guess apparently the Time magazine and other folks have said, FBI informants were also, Oath Keepers leader was 66-year-old guy was in there. Oh, wow. Oh, what's that about? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's so stupid, the stuff that they expect us to just, oh, yeah, it's all just a spontaneous attack that Donald Trump intended because what? I mean, you have to be literally brain dead to believe in the stupidity of what they're trying to sell people, that Donald Trump intended to do an insurrection. You know who intended to do insurrection? Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, against people of color in Libya, against people of color in Yemen, against people of color in Egypt. These are the disgusting, hateful insurrectionists that have stoked murder and mayhem and chaos that falls on the victims and the marginalized and the poor around the world the worst. They are the ones who have spent their entire careers fomenting insurrection and chaos. But you know why the media won't tell you they're bad? Because they don't care about the lives of the people that Biden and Clinton and Bush and Obama's policies have deliberately and wantonly crushed for their pathetic globalist attempt to control the world with their little revolutionary fervor. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski. We'll take a quick break and return after this short break. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Some out-of-the-area law firms advertise that they are the largest. Do you think large firms help your case? Possibly. But your case will receive personal care from local attorneys Catania and Catania. They are family-owned, Tampa Bay attorneys representing clients who have experienced auto and motorcycle accidents. Your case with Catania and Catania will seek to get a settlement in your favor expeditiously. Catania and Catania, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Referrals on request. Get the local law firm that will care for your case from beginning to end. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Catania and Catania, putting families first. Car accident, motorcycle accident, call the local attorneys. Catania and Catania. Offices Tampa, not attorney spokesperson.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host. And we're talking about this latest little escapade from DC, trying to make sense of why they do what they do. Why do they continue to persist in kicking a dead horse, so to speak? Because they don't think the horse is totally dead. They think that Donald Trump at 78 years old and 40 years could be such a potent threat that a 78-year-old Donald Trump, after all the stuff they've done, is still powerful enough to make them sweat. That's pathetic. Imagine if you had someone with the principles and articulation that was beyond Trump's capacity. Imagine if you had someone with the principles of, say, closer to like a Ron Paul, someone who was consistently principled in the defense of liberty and national sovereignty in a serious way, but also was young, charismatic, and had the name recognition that a Donald Trump had. These people have nothing. They have nothing but their parlor tricks to try to create groupthink conformity, fear-mongering. Now you need to wear 16 layers of masks. You know, they're trying to tell you 2, but go ahead and put 16 masks so that you can be a good person in their little religion. Put 16 on so you can show them that your works righteousness is better than theirs. When they come for your cloak, give them your tunic too, right? Just parody their fear-mongering, their hatefulness. I was listening to people talk about how cruel it is that their children have to spend their young childhoods on public school Zoom chats, Zoom videos, with no recognition of human interaction, no dynamic learning. Now, there isn't much dynamic learning really going on in government schools as a potential, as a standard. But even government schooling in person is much better than government schooling in a Zoom, like you're in total isolation. And you hear stories of children having to wear masks and stay 6 feet apart on the playground. Imagine that as a kindergartner. The stupidity of this COVID idiocy, anti-science, Luddite stupidity to put their own kids through these pathetic rites like dumb lemmings who never frickin' realize that human beings need social interaction, and that putting a kindergartner in a state of a mask, in a state of masked undifferentiation, in a state of isolation, 6 feet apart or more from their kids, their friends, it is a crime. It's a crime against humanity. The level of masked chaos, the level of masked insanity that continues to percolate in our culture. And it works because a lot of people are low information enough that they cannot understand what they're doing. They don't understand it. They just can't see that what they're doing is a disaster on so many levels. It's a disaster on their children's health. It's a disaster on their immune system. It's a disaster on their psychological health. Children, young kids are telling their parents they feel like they don't matter, that there's no hope. And no wonder they're turning to these stupid cotton candy fake religions like McWokeism. McWokeism is trying to offer them, hey, join the cause, attack somebody, scapegoat somebody, and you'll become part of our team. Update your purity code and your language holiness codes every 2 days, and you'll keep up with us. Maybe you'll have a spot on our religious cult. No forgiveness, no grace, no mercy, no seeing the neighbor as themselves, no loving your neighbor as you love yourself. None of that. Just good old-fashioned pagan sacrifice, but trying to imitate Jesus's concern for victims that he has implanted in our culture and in our time, in our society. It's really the worst of both worlds, because the ancient world had a coherent, united scapegoat mechanism with a united hierarchy that everybody agreed the myth had to be true and everybody agreed the rituals had to be conducted, and it all kind of made things work to a point. And it was a brutal and it was an ugly thing that the ancient world had to do. And it wasn't necessarily what they should have done, but it was expedient. But now today, Jesus has destroyed that unanimity because it was based on a lie and it was based on a murder. It's based on the scapegoat mechanism that Jesus revealed on the cross when he became the scapegoat for humanity. And as that story unfolds today, the scapegoat mechanism no longer works, and people still persist, though, in telling stories with an attempt to try to revivify justification to scapegoat some for the greater good. They want to justify their righteousness by saying, hey, I participate in a shared hatred for this person. This person violated taboos of conduct that I'm not allowed to violate, so we must all come together and banish them from the shared society that we have. But it is the worst mixture of Christianity in some sense and this old pagan, sacrificial way of scapegoating. Because the Christian concern for victims, of course, doesn't allow for the scapegoat mechanism to unite and create catharsis and peace and order. Jesus scrambles those narratives whenever they're attempted in our times. But at the same time, they're still persisting. So we get all the negative effect of rivalry and accusation and blame game and calls for violence, both in the street and in the political, bureaucratic form of mob violence. But we get none of the catharsis, the unity, the peace that the ancient world got when they conducted those types of behaviors in the past. So we're really in a weird spot, aren't we? We're like half Christian and half scapegoat pagans. And we don't want to go the full way of being Christian. No one, even the Christians don't want to go full Christian. Because if the Christians go full Christian, they have to give up their attempts to try to get a hold of centralized political power and wrestle power back from these folks and centralize it and do it in a way that is good. But that'll backfire. And when Jesus says, turn the other cheek and do not resist evil with violence, they don't understand that that is a proactive way of allowing evil to fall on its own face and dismantle its own strength by allowing it to collapse into its own overreach, under its own overreach. They don't understand that, a lot of Christians. And so they persist in trying to mirror the McWoke religion by saying, well, we'll get you back. We'll get you back with more political power. But the more they do that, the more they give the McWoke religion something to shadow box, something to use for fuel for its own ambitions and its own narrative. See, we have to be vicious. We have to deplatform. We have to cancel because look how bad our opponents are when they have power. And they're right. The folks that Christians and conservatives and so forth end up hiring in politics are often just as narcissistic and power hungry and slippery with their words and egotistical and self-interested as the other folks. And so it's a half-truth that kind of allows them to continue doing their book burning and deplatforming. Nobody wants to listen to Jesus who says power made perfect in weakness, nonviolence, is a proactive way of dismantling oppression. Back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice, after this short news break.
Ronald Reagan will turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040 WHP.
House trial managers in the Senate impeachment trial of former President Trump this hour releasing new videos, some of it graphic, from the U.S. siege at the Capitol, saying it shows that Trump incited the insurrection. Trial manager Stacey Plaskett.
He fanned the flame of violence, and it worked. You'll see this over time. These very groups and individuals whose violence the president praised helped lead the attack on January 6th.
They released dispatch and video of Capitol Police calls for help as the mob of Trump supporters stormed the building, killing one officer.
We're going to try to get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
1349 hours declaring it a riot.
House managers say the mob was searching for Vice President Mike Pence, also who was the president had called upon on the rally to stop Congress from certifying the votes. Trump's legal team will get equal time in the coming days to present their case. With continuing coverage, the impeachment trial, Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host. So glad to be with you. And here we turn now to the topic of school choice and the future of our education system. And we do that with our guest today, who's Corey DeAngelis. He is a leading advocate of school choice. He works with the Reason Foundation as the director of school choice. And he's here now to share the latest news coming out of West Virginia about a promising, step in the right direction towards allowing parents to have more freedom in what their kids are able to use for education. How you doing, Corey?
Hey, doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have you too. You posted an hour ago that legislators in 21 states have introduced bills to fund students instead of systems. And then the newest announcement is in West Virginia. Can you explain what this new West Virginia proposal is all about?
Yeah, totally. And I will say, I think a lot of it has to do with a surge in support for school choice this year in particular. And I think a lot of it is the teachers union's own doing. In a sense, the teachers unions have overplayed their hands by, one, keeping the schools closed, and then two, calling for a lot of political demands in their reports for reopening schools all across the country in the past year. So I think families are getting fed up, and they're seeing that, well, if their grocery store doesn't reopen, they could take their money elsewhere. And I think they're similarly thinking that if their child's school doesn't reopen in person 5 days a week, then they should similarly be able to take their children's education dollars elsewhere. And the latest national polling on this from Real Clear Opinion Research actually found that support for funding students directly has actually jumped in just a few months by 10 percentage points, from 67% in April to 77% support in August of 2020, which is a huge, unprecedented increase in support for school choice. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of a response to the coronavirus by the public school system in so many places. But in West Virginia, one of these 21 states that has a bill to fund students as opposed to institutions, has an interesting one that they just released the bill text today, and it looks like it would be available to about over 90% of the students in the state, which is a pretty expansive proposal for school choice. I think everybody should have access. 100% of families should have access to their children's education dollars. But a lot of the times you see that these programs are typically really small when they first start and targeted, and then they get bigger over time, like we've seen in Florida and their expansions. But in West Virginia, it looks like they're starting straight out of the gate, trying to get a program that's available to essentially everyone.
That's interesting. So what are the criteria in this West Virginia proposal, and is it likely to be able to pass with the government there?
Well, if you look at the legislature, and if you look at the fact that Republicans overwhelmingly are more likely to pass these things than Democratic candidates. For example, in Arizona, they just passed the bill to expand their tax credit scholarship program, another school choice type of program. They passed it out of the full Senate, and every single Republican voted for it, and every single Democrat voted against it. That doesn't mean that Democrats will never vote for it, but it's just a lot less likely for it to happen. So this is a possibility in Virginia based on the legislative makeup. And the specific eligibility requirements in West Virginia and why it's 90% or around that number and not 100% is that it requires you to switch out of a public school. And the reason that they do this is for the fiscal impact. They want the bill to be revenue neutral or actually save taxpayer money. And if you're paying for people who are already paying out of pocket for private school tuition and fees, then that's an additional cost to the taxpayer, or at least it could be if it worked out a certain way. So I think that's one part of the bill that could actually be fixed by amending the bill to make it available to everyone, and then just change the numbers and the scholarship amounts to make it to where it's revenue neutral or positive. But this is huge. I mean, this is 90% eligibility is huge for any type of school choice proposal. And so this is definitely a step or even a leap in the right direction.
Yeah. So when you would have that, where would the funding come from? A particular, just a general fund from the taxes of the state, or a particular type of tax or revenue source?
Yep. And this is the one in West Virginia is similar to most states, where it's based on a percentage of what the kid would have gotten in the public school through state funding. In West Virginia, it's the amount in the bill is specified to be 90% of what you would have gotten in your traditional public school, and that leads to a taxpayer savings, leads to a benefit for the public school. They get some money to help adapt to that change, and it's a win for families because they get the choice to stay in the public school or take their money elsewhere, and so that's how these things work. And I will say it's only tied to the amount of the state revenue, not the local revenue. So it probably works out to be about half of the total what would have been spent in the public school, which is still a long way towards paying for. It's a big step towards covering private school tuition, especially when you look at the fact that private school tuition tends to be a lot lower on average than what they spend in the traditional public schools.
Right.
So this is how it usually works in most states.
Now, how does the
and by the way, the specific type of program is an education savings account program. It's kind of like a voucher, where the voucher funding would follow the child to pay for private school tuition and fees, the funding that would have went to the public school. But with education savings accounts, the same kind of thing. The money follows the child, but it goes into a family education savings account for that particular child, and the family can choose to take that money to pay for private school tuition and fees, but they could also use it for any other approved education expenditure, including vocational education, tutoring, instructional materials, textbooks, micro schools or pandemic pods. You can use it for home-based education. And so it really takes us from school choice to education choice. And if you look at the majority of these bills that have been introduced this year, these 21 states, they tend to be education savings accounts. And I think this is the future of school choice because it's the closest thing that we can get to actually funding students directly, giving the money to the families and letting them use it at any approved education provider of their choosing.
So how does this educational savings account work? Like, how do you keep accountability for what's being spent or whatever for the educational program of your choice or materials?
Yeah, you can't use it you can't use it at your favorite restaurant, for example. So there are restrictions in place. That's why I made sure to repeat that it has to be for any approved education expenditure. It can't be used for restaurants.
Is it like a voucher or,
for example,
a card or something?
Kind of like a voucher. It can be in the form of a debit card. If not, they also have online systems to do it, to where it's all online, and there's a lot less likelihood of fraud to happen if it's done primarily online. And so, in a lot of these cases, even in the debit card form of this, if you're spending at a non-approved provider, it won't go through. And if you do have an instance of fraud, those families will get in trouble for spending the money in the wrong way. And I will say that there has been an audit of a similar education savings account program in Arizona, and I think they found their fraud rate to be very low, 1% or less, whereas you have fraud rates in other government programs tend to be about 5%, and fraud rates even in the school system and the school lunch program have been estimated to be around 16%. So this is a lot better than most programs as far as fraud is concerned. Of course, you want to get that number to zero, but we shouldn't make perfect the enemy of the good and assume that everybody is going to be guilty until proven innocent. If people do spend the money fraudulently, we should absolutely have the government step in after the fact, but we shouldn't punish 100% of families just in case 1% might do the wrong thing. And then we shouldn't pretend like the public schools don't spend any money fraudulently either. The reality is the families are more likely to get these decisions right and less likely to commit fraud with these funds than bureaucrats in offices hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, it's an interesting development. It's and people keep saying it's one of the best things that's happening in this crazy, chaotic time of coercion and madness of crowds. How does the West Virginia proposal compare to what Florida has currently, or what Florida may be doing in the future?
Florida is one of the front runners. It's leading the way when it comes to school choice, primarily private school choice initiatives. Just last year, Governor DeSantis signed into law a bill that was the biggest expansion of private school choice in U.S. history. So Florida is really knocking it out of the park when it comes to advancing school choice measures. I think that bill expanded private school choice by about 20 to 30,000 additional students being eligible per year. And also, Senator Manny Diaz this year in January, I believe, introduced Senate Bill 48, which is another step in the right direction. So Florida was already leading the way, and then they have another bill to keep pushing its way forward, which would restructure all 5 of the existing private school choice programs in the state and turn them all into education savings accounts. So before, 4 of the 5 programs were not education savings accounts. They were tax credit scholarships or vouchers, which could only be used to pay for private school tuition and fees, which is pretty restricting for individual families if they want to do a micro school type of thing, or a pandemic pod, or a homeschool option, or if they want to use it for special needs therapies or other non-private school expenditures, which could be education related. This would allow for all these families using these programs to use the funding at any education provider that's approved by the government of their choosing. So this really brings, it's a move from school choice to education choice. And look, schooling is only one way to achieve an education. In a lot of ways, schooling could actually be antithetical to education if it's done in the wrong way. So I think this is really a big step in the right direction when it comes to maximizing the ability of families to customize their children's educational experience. And then there's a couple of other things in the bill in Florida as well, but that's the big change here. And I think it turns everything into a family empowerment scholarship program and one other program. So it reduces the number of programs by merging them together. And I think if families are on a wait list like they are in the tax credit scholarship program, this would solve that problem by meeting the demand of parents with supply of funding through taxpayer funding. A lot of the programs in Florida are tax credit scholarships, which rely on private donations. And in those situations, you could have families get stuck on a wait list if the donations just aren't there. They already have their money in the system for their children allocated from the taxpayer to state coffers. We might as well have that same money follow the child to wherever they're getting an education without relying on private donations. So this is another way that this proposal is a step forward to giving all families their children's education dollars.
Corey DeAngelis.
But it still has a long way to go. Look, even if this passes, Florida still has a long way to go to have all families access school choice, regardless of the background of their children. But hey, we can't make perfect the enemy of the good. A step in the right direction, I'll take any day of the week. And Florida is going to probably continue this for years to come.
What percentage of Florida students are eligible for this right now?
It depends on the particular program. I will say that only about 5% of students in Florida are actually using a private school choice program, but usage versus eligibility is not the same thing. You can be eligible, but then still stay in the public school system. So only about 5% are using the program, and it really depends on the specific program, for example, the McKay Scholarship for students with disabilities, is available to about 13% of students. So currently, all the students, about 300,000 students, are identified as having special needs in Florida. So that's a large number of students have access to that particular program. There's another program that's limited based on your income level, and so it really depends on the program. But Florida is much more expansive than a lot of other states, and it seems to be moving in the right direction every year.
It's promising to hear, and it's a lot of Florida seems to be everybody's catching up to Florida Man now, Corey. So it seems like we're all kind of realizing that Florida was the one that everybody was discounting all along when it comes to leading the way for a lot of things related to liberty. What is there anything else in the school choice news that you want to cover in this last moment that we have you?
Yeah, you asked the percentages. I just pulled it up really quick. For the income-based program, for example, is about 50% of families have children that are income eligible statewide. So that's pretty expansive. I mean, it's not everybody, but it's going to continue moving in that right direction to be available to everyone, especially with what we're seeing introduced in different places in Florida. Then also, I just want to say this is. I'm really optimistic about school choice moving forward this year, particularly because the teachers' unions have essentially been providing free advertising for school choice over the past year. They've done more to advance the idea of school choice than anyone could have ever imagined. And they've essentially overplayed their hand here. And look, school choice is going to keep advancing in the places that it matters the most, and that happens to be at the state and local level. 92% of education funding at the K-12 level comes from state and local sources. So even though we have an administration that's not particularly friendly to the idea of school choice will continue to expand because it's a great idea, and there's no good reason to fund the system when you can fund the students directly instead, and more families are starting to figure it out.
Great news, as always, Corey DeAngelis. You're one of my favorite guests. Always feel positive news when I have you on. So great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll continue live on A Neighbor's Choice in just a moment. Hello, this is David Kronosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, your host, and just had a great time with Corey DeAngelis. He just joined us. He's really got the numbers, got the data, got the information, and he has the arguments for why we need decentralized competition in school and education. One of the great silver linings of this time where, well, there's a lot of great things to be excited about. It's just rocky whenever you see a fragile religion with dogmatists and angry folks who are just maddened with rage, wanting to just tear each other apart. And it happens on both sides of the aisle, but it is clear that one side has a monopoly on media and culture, and they love to abuse it and to stir the pot in reckless and dangerous ways. So anytime we can cool the temperature and look to solutions outside of politics like private and homeschooling, I'm always excited about that. I think that's great. I think that's a step in the right direction. That's where we need to go. But I wanted to read some of the comments here on our YouTube and Facebook video stream. We have folks, always great insights here. David says they believe that 1984 is an instruction manual referring to, I guess, the establishment of D.C. Seriously, though, Trump is Goldstein and Trumpism is Goldsteinism, ever being purged, but somehow always springing up anew. Reed says scapegoat one half of America and get the other half to comply and insist on it, straight out of Satan's playbook. Great analysis, David. We are a Christ-haunted society, and the corrupt, misanthropic echelon still have to deal with that if they want power, so they masquerade as the compassionate party while looting and violating the global powerless. Amen. Nailed it. That's a great summary of what I'm trying to say. I always love hearing other people's perspectives because they can articulate things. We're getting at the same truth, but they can, summarize things in different words. It just, it's like it's the same truth, but it's always great to hear it in a succinct way like that. So thanks for sharing that. It's so true, though. We are a Christ-haunted society, but the corrupt elites and corporations and government bureaucracies, they have to deal with that. So they masquerade as the compassionate party while looting and violating the global powerless. Amen to that. Amishi, another commenter online on our live stream, says they thought COVID would unite us. They thought the election being won would unite us. They think this impeachment trial will unite us. They will not unite us because you cannot unite people through sacrifice. You cannot unite people through a monomyth in which one team is the designated good guys and the other team is the irredeemable villains. It's not going to be able to be accepted. And people point, here's the thing that's interesting though. People point to the 20th century with Hitlerism and Stalinism and Maoism and all these horrible examples in which societies with revolutionary fervor, with statism, come up with the most callous, hateful treatments of their neighbor, killing millions of people as a result. And they say, look, don't ever think that that couldn't happen here. And I want to agree with them, but there's something about how media evolves, which I'm going to get into on our podcast probably this week with our Things Hidden podcast, which I do. It's online only at aneighborschoice.com or wherever you get your podcast feeds. You want to go and check out, search for David Gronowski and subscribe to the podcast feed. Write a review. That helps more people learn about us, by the way. So you want to write a review, share it, blah, 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 all that good stuff. Get the word out because this is a grassroots media project. This is a media production house of the people, so to speak. And we have to have everybody's involvement to make this thing really pop and really take off so that the people who need to understand this message of peace can understand it. But back to my point, the environment that we're in is so dependent on them trying to create a monomyth. But when you have a digital decentralized media environment, it's much harder for them to pull off, let's say, folks who want to use the state in any means possible to create power. It's a lot harder to do it in the most overt and brutal forms like the 20th century model, because you got to understand they had a different media environment. This is where Marshall McLuhan is important. And you got to understand Marshall McLuhan's media ecology in relationship to some of the other things that I talk about on this show, and how the gospel destroys the binding agents of sacrifice, the binding agents being the myths, the stories that we unite together and say, this is the way it should be. It's okay because this grand project that requires sacrifice. With media evolution, we don't have TV and radio anymore. You know, in the time of Hitler and Stalin and so forth, that's a radio, newspaper, and TV society. It's a lot easier to have a monomyth percolate in which you can whip up people into a conformity of groupthink, which is very uniting and powerful, and which can create a lot of harm. Now, I'm not saying that we're totally immune to something really bad and violent happening if government continues to spiral out of control in its aggressive censorship of dissenting thoughts, right? But it does seem that in the environment that we're in, where we have video, HD video, high quality audio, capture devices, and display and playback devices on our phones, we have internet, we have and then we have social media platforms and so forth. We have so many different decentralized communication nodes that are developing that I don't know if they could ever resurrect a uniformity. Now they're doing pretty good, right, with this COVID scare mongering, and but it's so divisive. It's not unified. It's not selling as well as other groupthink hysterias that give status power in the past have. And so it doesn't sell as well. It doesn't feel as believable by the public. Even those who say they believe it, a lot of them are just going along with it. And that can be a problem too, because just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean you won't go along with doing horrible things or being a bystander for bad policies. So yes, this cancel culture is a concern. But the digital age deconstructs the monomyth and allows the gospel concern for victims to really penetrate the hearts of people in many, many different ways beyond what 20th century totalitarianism was able to get away with. So I think we're in a different environment. That doesn't mean be Pollyannish here. It just means that we're in a different environment. And it means that Jesus is king, and he's increasingly showing why that's the case. So let's get with the program. We'll be back in just a moment after this short break. But in the meantime, remember, subscribe to our podcast, write a review. So if you're watching on video stream, subscribe there. Stay in touch with us. Email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com with your comments, your guest suggestions. I always love hearing from you folks. And we'll be back in just a moment. But for now, Godspeed.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. House trial managers have spent 5 hours so far presenting evidence in the impeachment trial of former President Trump that includes showing unseen video and audio from the January 6th inside the Capitol building, with police calling for help on dispatch.
But this is now effectively a riot.
That, along with Trump's past tweets, video, and a paid campaign, they say, to stop the steal that incited the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Trial manager Joe Neguse says the mob of Trump supporters went to the Capitol and encouraged to fight like hell.
Senators, this clearly was not just one speech. It didn't just happen. It was part of a carefully planned, months-long effort with a very specific instruction. Show up on January 6th and get your people to fight the certification.
Trial managers and Trump's defense team will have 16 hours apiece to present their case. President Joe Biden keeping his focus on the new administration, making a trip to the Pentagon today to mark Black History Month, and also working to build bipartisan support for his American Rescue Plan. Press Secretary Jen Psaki at the White House says it includes funding for essential services.
He's proposed $350 billion in support for state and local government. That means keeping cops, firefighters, public health workers, teachers, and other public servants on the job in the fight against the virus.
A handful of states now reporting cases of the South African variant, California the latest, and the CDC is pointing to a recent study showing doubling up on masks could help.
Wearing a single mask is good, but you can do more, according to a new CDC study being presented in the medical journal JAMA. Researchers finding double masking is better, with a surgical mask on the bottom layer and a cloth mask above, and making sure whatever mask you wear is sealed tightly to the face.
ABC's Alex Stone, you're listening to ABC News.
Maybe you've heard about MediShare and you know what it is. It's the affordable alternative to health insurance, but you've wondered, can I really save a significant amount of money on my monthly healthcare bills? And the answer is an emphatic yes, you can. You could save a lot of money, whether it's just for you or for an entire family. MediShare has an option for you. In fact, the typical family saves $500 a month switching to MediShare. And it really is the gold standard when it comes to healthcare sharing. You get free telehealth services, you get a huge network of doctors, you get great customer support, and you get the sense of security that comes from being a part of 400,000 people who share not just each other's medical bills, but purpose too. MediShare is a community of Christians who pull together and pray for each other, which is very refreshing right now. If you want more info, it's so simple. You can get a price within 2 minutes. Call 877-26-BIBLE. That's 877-26-BIBLE. 877-26-BIBLE.
An uptick in violence against Asian Americans reported in almost every state. The pandemic being eyed as a contributing factor. ABC's Kana Whitworth with more.
A rise in disturbing attacks. The violence involving mostly elderly Asian Americans. Police investigating a recent string of attacks in the Bay Area, but community leaders say people there have been on edge all year.
The frequency is much higher, the number is much higher, and the attack is more severe.
Stop AAPI Hate launched a tracking project, reporting more than 2,800 firsthand accounts in 47 states and the District of Columbia.
Twitter says it suspended some Indian accounts after the company was served with several blocking orders by the government. That move in the wake of the weeks-long protest by Indian farmers against a new farm bill. Twitter says none of the suspended accounts belong to journalists, activists, or politicians, saying doing so would violate free speech. Government officials have said users are posting content inciting violence. 50 years ago today, one of the best-selling of all time released.
I feel the earth move under my feet. I feel the sky tumbling.
Carole King's album, From Tapestry. The album stayed on the Billboard album chart for more than 300 weeks. King was nominated today to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the first time as a performer. She's already inducted as a songwriter. This is ABC News.
Ready to create your own income with your own home-based business where there's no such thing as getting laid off? If a billionaire entrepreneur spent 5 years and $20 million searching for the next big trend, wouldn't you want to know what he found? If you're serious about making money from home without having to leave home, then write this down. www.goherenext.com. You decide your income. Get the facts now. GoHereNext.com.
Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Hello, this is David Kronosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
You can't have a fresh outlook on the new year if you're staring through a chipped or cracked windshield. Autoglass America will fix it and give you up to $150 cash back to help pay holiday bills. With qualifying insurance, we'll come to you with mobile service and install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Get a great outlook on the new year with a new windshield and New Year's cash from Autoglass America. 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS.
A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granotsky. So glad to be with you. Hope you're doing great. This is hour 2 of our broadcast today. We're live on FM and AM across the heart of the Sunshine State, soaring high on those air signals all around this beautiful area that we live in. And it's true, everybody's becoming Florida man now, aren't they, They always used to mock us because they were jealous of our beautiful sunshine, our beautiful weather, our beautiful humid air, which is great for the lungs, right? Always a little jealous, those New Yorkers, those Californians, and now they're fleeing. They're fleeing like a bunch of, stowaways, jumping ship, right? Because they bet on the mimetic fashions of those big cities in LA and New York City, and they didn't work out so well, did they? Sometimes it's okay to be Florida man. Sometimes that's just all right. And that's something that a lot of folks are learning faster and faster in our time. And that's great. It's great to have people realize that, you don't have to go off to the big city in LA or San Francisco or New York City to have a good business success. That actually, we need to think decentralized. It's not just Florida. It's other places that have been treated disrespectfully by, the New York and LA media and entertainment. I want to read from a portion of this new book called The Enduring Tension by Donald J. Devine, which is about capitalism and the moral order. He talks about Rene Girard in a way, I've talked about Rene Girard, the anthropologist from Stanford, who created the mimetic theory, which united the social sciences, using the Bible as the key to all knowledge. And so I want to read from this passage here because I just think I always like hearing other people's summations of this mechanism that Girard describes and that many other folks have touched on when encountering the gospel and the truth that has been revealed by the story of Jesus in history. So we'll comment as we go. But Donald Devine, by the way, he was an individual who he's a senior scholar at the Fund for American Studies. He's an academic, a columnist, author of 9 books, 9 previous books to this one. He's the last of a dozen intellectuals once identified as the leading lights of the post-war fusionist reevaluation of conservative and libertarian thinking. For a quarter century, he was a professor of government at the University of Maryland and Bellevue University. He was a longtime advisor to Ronald Reagan and served as director of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management during his first presidential term. So just his treatment of Girard here is interesting. What taboo is powerful enough to instill fear sufficient to overcome the passionate desire for goods and suppress destructive rivalries? The most dramatic is taking life, human or animal, in a rite of sacrifice. Freud wrote that all ritual preserves the memory of a murder that founded a culture. Just as animal predators choose the weakest victim, archaic human leaders appear to have chosen the weak and crippled as scapegoats for ritual sacrifice. An outcast can be sacrificed as a way of uniting factions, which will all turn equally against the victim. Oh, by the way, remember how they used to try to, we'll save that. Not yet. Girard noted that Caiaphas, the high priest at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, had told his fellow Jewish leaders, "It is better that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed." Those who did not understand this basic social reality, Caiaphas said, know nothing at all. And that's an important thing. See, when you think about the Bible, you're told by the modern culture that, it's just a bunch of fairy tales or something, but it's such a fake, superficial, and religious way to interpret the text. Other religions are cropping into our blind spots here when we approach the text that way. The Bible is actually revealing the deep fundamental mechanics of how human beings and how human culture works. And if you are blinded by that and you're only looking for a theology or metaphysics to be derived from the text, you'll miss this. You'll miss what Caiaphas says when he says, if you don't understand that the whole purpose of society is that one man should die, then for the whole nation to be destroyed. If you don't understand that that's the heart of politics, that's the heart of government, that's the heart of all this pomp and circumstance that they try to dress up with all this fancy pomp and circumstance, Caiaphas says you know nothing at all. So the text is trying to get you to see the heart of politics, but we're so busy trying to make it a moral condemnation for particular moral foibles, which that's there, that's a part of it, but you're missing the forest for the trees. Something bigger is being revealed in the Gospels, and it's so exciting to share this with people in a broadcast medium like this. I feel like this is the beginning of something very special together. Girard cited myths from nations across the world that involve hidden sacrifice from which scapegoats emerge as gods. The Ojibwa and Tikopia tales that Claude Levi-Strauss relates in Totemism, Euripides' The Bacchae, Philostratus's The Life of Apollonius of Tyana, Inca and Hindu traditions, the stories of Romulus and Oedipus, and many others. Girard's interpretation of these stories is that once the scapegoat has appeased the contending factions by uniting them against him and is safely dead, he can be recognized as a sacrifice for the good of the community, which then appreciates the reconciliation and peace brought about through his death. The return to calmer times after the sacrifice first appears to confirm the guilt of the innocent victim. So basically, after they take care of their scapegoat, right, ancient societies, they feel a sense of calm, catharsis. It's the same feeling you feel when you used to watch those superhero movies and as a kid in the theater, and you felt that release of tension when the bad guy was thrown down or defeated, right? Darth Vader is destroyed, what have you. But the return to calm after the sacrifice first appears to confirm that the guilt of the innocent victim, but fear of the dead could, perhaps at the urging of an erudite leader, then lead to reverence for the victim in light of the better times that follow the sacrifice. So perhaps people in that primitive state, when they sacrifice someone in our past, after that, there's a fear of the dead that, you know, man, we feel so great, but we better not disrespect this person that we killed because their spirit might come back and give us real trouble. So we better do whatever it was. We better put rituals and taboos and prohibitions in place so as to not, disturb him or bring him back to get us in trouble. That's something that you can see all around. If you look at indigenous cultures, they talk about don't disturb the dead. Watch out for, our ancestors tell us this is the way this has to be. We have to do this ritual. We have to do this rite of passage for our young men or young women. And you have all these different carefully constructed symbols and things that are used. And they're always, if you ask them, well, where did you get it? They'll say, well, we got it from our ancestors. And they got it from the spirits of their ancestors. And they got it from the gods who gave it down in the original created order and so forth. And so you see that these myths and these traditions that people, you can still hear about in indigenous cultures today are vestiges of a kind of scapegoat murder, okay? So think about that when you think about how the media is trying to politically murder Donald Trump. They're trying to politically destroy and vanquish the symbol that he represents of any kind of opposition to their monomyth, their uniparty rhetoric. It's not going to work if you listen to this, you see. But the fear of the fear of the dead could then lead to reverence for the victim in light of better times that follow the sacrifice. Rituals devised by the wise shaman reinforce the restrictions to which the opposing factions have agreed, and the united community over time elevates the victim to the status of a god to complete the myth's inclusion in the cosmological order. As myths or superstitions solidified into traditions and then cultures, they produced the order that prepared the way for the agricultural societies that have been the focus of almost all systematic research. Agricultural societies was carnivorous, even though the human esophagus does not seem naturally to pass meat. So why did people start eating meat? Gerard suggests that the eating of animals and the domestication of animals both emerged from sacrificial ceremonies. So did kingship. Most trade and the state itself. Even today, British coronation ceremonies begin with pseudo-lethal threats against the new monarch and end with him or her accepting responsibility for bearing the burden and sins of the community, while the subjects accept the obligation to obey this now sacred leader. So you see, you can see in just Donald Devine's this book. I'm going to be interviewing Donald Devine later this week, actually tomorrow, and that'll be available on our website at neighborschoice.com as a Things Hidden edition of our podcast. But you can see that even in that British coronation ceremony, they have these pseudo-lethal rites that they use that are vestiges of the fact that even kings were originally scapegoats. That's why Jesus was paraded around as a king before they sacrificed him. That's why they would take someone in the Saturnalia festival and parade them around as a king before they would sacrifice them to the god of Saturn. Eventually, they did animals in substitution of humans, but at the core, it is still that same logic that, you know, you have to tear apart a one life as a kind of ultimate taboo, indicator that this is what happens to you when we have chaos. So we cannot break the taboos of differentiation, boundaries of self, things like that. But ultimately, that's not a system that can sustain itself anymore, because Jesus has gone to war with that system through nonviolent creative destruction by entering into our mode of myth making and doing it in real life. See, the myths that we told were just symbolic projections of the process of sacrificing and scapegoating one. First, you accuse them of being a monster. Then you destroy them and purge them. And then you feel great. And then you say, hey, maybe they weren't so bad. Maybe they were good and bad. Maybe they could bless or curse us. And so they become a god over time in the storytelling, because they have the power to unite or create chaos, just like all the ancient gods did too. Gods of war, gods of lust, gods of money, all those things are symbolic representations of desire going too far, of envy going too far. And so they become these symbols of not going too far with runaway envy or runaway desire that can contagiously turn into conflict and disorder and chaos. There's a reason why human beings had found a way to survive, because they were able to channel their mimetic violence, their imitational violence, into a safe, ritualistic process. But it was ultimately one that was based on a lie. And Jesus is destroying that process, but he doesn't destroy it with violence. He destroys it by getting us to see slowly that we have to wake up from that behavior and stop it and learn to get along with each other, neighbor to neighbor, with skin in the game and self-sacrifice, not sacrifice of our neighbor. We'll return in just a moment with more live on A Neighbor's Choice. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals, join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Do you despise lawyers? That may be the case until you need one. If you've been in an auto accident and need legal advice, go to the local attorneys that have served Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Catania and Catania. They are family owned. They understand your legal situation. When you need legal representation, Catania and Catania will care for your case from the beginning to the end of representation. You won't need to worry. Catania and Catania will represent you through the entire process. Auto or motorcycle accidents are too frequent in Florida. Catania and Catania. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Referrals on request. Contact Catania and Catania. Putting families first. Offices, Tampa. An attorney spokesperson.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. David Gronowski here, your host. We're live on FM and AM, having a great time looking at the news, guided by the personhood revolution of Jesus. Isn't that great to have this time to spread the message of truth and beauty, love and forgiveness, nonviolence and personhood, innovation, thinking for ourselves? That's what this stuff is all about. It's great stuff. It's practical stuff. It's life-affirming stuff. It's not, fancy, out of touch stuff like you think Christianity is. It's way more rooted into everyday reality, the things that you're dealing with, How do I, have peace? How do I have a career? How do I have success? How do I innovate? How do I, educate myself? How do I keep my health in good shape? Keeping your health in good shape it requires you to be able to have the epistemological humility and discernment to be able to look at something like the food pyramid and the single payer nutrition science and say, just like Jesus challenged the sacred cows that were backed by coercive violence in his time, you can do the same thing and say, hey, wait a second, the state initiates and preemptively uses coercion. So therefore, whatever they're pushing is going to have a kind of ineffective capturing of the truth because it's protected by coercion. It doesn't have the ability to know what it doesn't know. Right? And that's why Jesus helps us. Jesus is where we get modern science. Jesus is where we get the best of technological development. But of course, he's been lied about and disparaged by those who say they're his followers and those who say they don't agree with him. But they're all playing in his fishbowl of being able to desacralize the world away from myth and away from collective violence. But of course, ideology continues to try to push collective violence back into the situation that we find ourselves in as a way of kind of, always trying to go back to that old time religion that Caiaphas talked about, that it's okay that one should perish, then the whole nation perish. Look at this story in Miami Herald. White House looks at domestic travel restrictions as COVID mutation surges in Florida. So remember I told you everybody wants to be Florida man now? Well, look at this. The Biden administration is considering whether to impose domestic travel restrictions, including on Florida, fearful that coronavirus mutations are threatening to reverse hard-fought progress on the pandemic. That's so stupid. I mean, these people, hard-fought progress. As long as Donald Trump was in office, there was no help. Nothing was happening good. Nobody could trust the vaccines. Nobody could trust any of the policies. Nobody could trust anything. It was all just a total failure. And now, of course, look at all the hard-fought progress we've had on the pandemic. But Florida, which has less deaths than California in the New York situation, and they're using all the hard lockdowns and CCP imitating style tactics. Of course, not that extreme, but they wish they could go that far probably if they could get away with it. In some of those states. But you have this situation where you have them trying to push and push and push for, I guess now, travel restrictions to Florida. Outbreaks of the new variants, including a highly contagious one first identified in the United Kingdom, as well as others from South Africa and Brazil that scientists worry can evade existing vaccines, have lent urgency to a review of potential travel restrictions within the United States, one federal official said. There are active conversations about what could help mitigate spread here, but we have to follow the data and what's going to work. We did this with South Africa. We did this with Brazil because we got clear guidance, one White House official said. But we're having conversations about anything that would help mitigate spread, the official said, referring to discussions about new travel restrictions that could target the spread of the UK mutation in Florida. Two federal government officials underscored that no policy announcements are imminent and that any move to restrict travel or impose new health measures would be taken in partnership with state and local governments. So, of course, they want to do that to punish Florida. They want to make an example. They know that Florida depends on travel. And so they're petty little tyrants. They're pathetic, transparently desperate and pitiful, wannabe tyrants. And they can't stand the thought that anybody does anything different from the way they want you to do. So they want to punish a state like Florida that has more freedom of commerce, freedom of association. But of course, can't let anything positive or good happen. You got to have everything clamped down. Now you got to cut down from people being able to travel and quarantine Florida, because Florida has less deaths than their stupid jokes of governors and so forth. But therefore, because Florida does something that advances freedom, the freedom must be scapegoated all day, every day. Cannot allow any kind of example of freedom to look good. And that's the way the media is going to play it. That's how the government's going to play it. Biden will not allow Florida to look good, even though our record shows that our less heavy-handed approach has resulted in more people's lives being saved than these disaster hotspots in other states. So look at this. You can see the scapegoating of Florida happening. It'll continue. They're probably going to put billions of dollars into trying to take out Ron DeSantis when he's up for re-election, because they cannot stand even one iota of difference, one iota of optionality and difference in politics. Has to have everybody uniform like an empire. It's a joke. Back in just a moment.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on. The madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going on.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHBO.
House impeachment managers say former President Trump was determined to remain in power by any means necessary. Pennsylvania Congresswoman Madeline Dean.
This attack never would have happened but for Donald Trump. And so they came, draped in Trump's flag, and used our flag the American flag, to batter and to bludgeon.
Delegate Stacey Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands describing the mob that descended on the Capitol.
After President Trump had primed his followers for months and inflamed the rally goers that morning, it is no wonder that the Vice President of the United States was the target of their wrath after Pence refused to overturn the election results.
She says they were willing to harm or kill. With continuing coverage, the impeachment trial. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski here, your host. Our website's aneighborschoice.com. And we're talking about the news today, but we're going to take a shift and look at criminal justice reform. That's a topic that's close to our hearts on this program. We deal with it a lot. Nobody else, you don't hear MSNBC. These are fake outlets when it comes to justice. They don't really spend a lot of attention on it. They only use it for partisanship. We don't have any partisan deal to sell you. We'll tell you which team is good on some things and wrong when they're wrong and right when they're right. They're just going to push the media, Fox News, MSNBC. They're just going to push whatever helps the powerful look good with special interests and so forth, being really keen on shifting and keeping narratives a certain way. So when Trump pardoned people, of course, it was all part of, it was always his friends. No, it wasn't. I mean, we've had many of the people he's pardoned over the years, and many of them are average persons just like you and I. They didn't have any connection politically to Trump, but the media lies. See, if you don't know the particulars, if you're not involved with the particulars of these cases, if you're just a low information person listening to the media like NBC and all this garbage, you wouldn't know how to be, how to find the truth. You would just say, oh, yeah, I guess Trump only pardons people connected to him politically. That's not the case. You just got to know the folks who he's actually pardoned. And then you'll realize, no, these are not friends of Trump. They're not political allies. And that's what, our show kind of sheds light on, is that we don't care who it is pardoning them. We're going to celebrate every captive coming home when they're stuck in a violent prison cage for nonviolent victimless acts. Things that shouldn't have one day in prison. And they have to be in there many times for years and years and years. This is not a way to treat human beings. This is not a way a Christian society should treat anybody. You should have a place. It's okay to have a timeout space for those who've engaged in real violent acts. But when there's no victim on the police report, why should we call them a criminal in the sense that we put them into a cage where they're denied their freedoms, denied their ability to talk to their family, denied their ability to have a life in the normal sense of the word, denied their access to proper nutrition because of some victimless, nonviolent crime? See, this is what happens when we rely on the state to be our nanny, that the state will tell us what we're allowed to eat, what we're allowed to consume. And of course, they allow us to have addictive chemicals in our food. They allow us to have addictive chemicals in caffeine, addictive chemicals, alcohol, addictive prescription drugs even. But they have to go through the right rites of passage, you see. You go through the rite of passage. You spend $1 billion to get the FDA to approve your painkiller. Then, then you can get that out to the public. And then people get into really bad situations. But meanwhile, they have to scapegoat the common drug dealer or the common person who is addicted to prescriptions or other drugs, because that somehow provides a cover, provides a social binding for folks who want to legally sell addictive substances like alcohol or caffeine or prescription drugs or other things, gambling, working too much. All those different things are forms that can. Those are all things that can become addictive things. So that's part of the whole deal. And again, the folks who said they were going to be out in the streets because they were opposing Trump being reelected, they should be demanding justice. They said they're for criminal justice reform. Why aren't they demanding that Biden and Kamala Harris pardon all nonviolent offenders right now? There's a raging pandemic. Why don't they do that? Why aren't they putting their money where the mouth is? I guess rich billionaires didn't pay them, and that's why they're not speaking out right now. Rich billionaires didn't put their money where their mouth is, right? And that's why you don't hear from the McWoke crowd right now. Because if they were really caring about people's, plight in an unjust criminal justice system, then they would be demanding that the person that they take credit for putting into office, for the ones that they say, hey, we rallied the youth vote to turn in Biden votes, that's something that you're just supposed to just forget about. You're just supposed to say, hey, they rallied for Biden. They rallied for getting him elected. They take credit for him being elected. Black Lives Matter organizations. Hey, even Antifa. But they said they were doing it because the corrupt justice system of Trump was just insufferable. But if it was insufferable, why are they not doing anything to free the captives that Biden locked up all those years ago for his whole career, now that there's a raging pandemic? That's strange, isn't it? It's very strange. We're going to take a quick break and return and try to see if we can get some guests on that we have planned for today. But if we'll take a quick break and return. So go ahead and, let's just take a break. And back in just a moment. Hello, this is David Kronosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code neighbor. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
Some out of the area law firms advertise that they are the largest. Do you think large firms help your case? Possibly, but your case will receive personal care from local attorneys Catania and Catania. They are family-owned, Tampa Bay attorneys representing clients who have experienced auto and motorcycle accidents. Your case with Catania and Catania will seek to get a settlement in your favor expeditiously. Catania and Catania, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Referrals on request. Get the local law firm that will care for your case from beginning to end. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Catania and Catania, putting families first. Car accident, motorcycle accident, call the local attorneys. Catania and Catania. Offices Tampa. Not attorney spokesperson.
With PatriotSoftware.com, accounting and payroll, keep your time and money. Easy to learn, easy to use, small business software tailored just for you. With PatriotSoftware.com, accounting and payroll, keep your time and money.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, and I'm talking with our friend from the Can Do Clemency Foundation. We have with us Amy Pova. How you doing, Amy?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you.
Well, I'm great to have you on, and I wanted to have you on again to kind of talk about another story. We're trying to work with getting her on the phone right now. I was having some connection issues with her, but go ahead and tell us about the story of the person we want to highlight today who got a pardon from Donald Trump, or a clemency, I guess, right? It was clemency, not pardon, right?
Right, yes. Well, Levon Roach is somebody who's very near and dear to my heart because we actually served time together in Dublin before I got out of prison. She came in around 98, and I left July 7th, 2000. So we met up in the law library, and I often would help people who came in and had the same look that I had when I first walked in there. It's overwhelming, intimidating. You don't even understand half of it because, believe it or not, you start off filing a writ of habeas corpus, which is in Latin. And so you have a tendency to turn around and walk out the first time you go into a law library in a facility. So Levon reminded me that I actually helped her get a court-appointed attorney for her 2255. And sometimes we'd walk the track together, and, normally everybody's dreaming about how we're going to get out of there, when we're going to get out of there, will laws change, who's going to save us? And lo and behold, hopefully if Levon is able to patch in, I think she's calling in now, we had the big victory at the end of the Trump administration, and it was hard won because she should have received it during the Obama administration because her prosecutor supported her clemency, wrote a letter supporting it, but somehow she got passed over. So we asked her prosecutor to write another letter to President Trump, and I do know in the 11th hour that letter was shown to Ivanka Trump and pretty much seemed to seal the deal. So if Levon's on, I'd love to introduce her and have her share her story with us.
Hey, Levon, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
So, Levon, I was just giving a little preliminary and would love for you to share with the audience what it was like to have to do 23 years on a 30-year sentence, primarily based on, testimony of other people, and also what it was like to finally be reunited with your family. You have children, then you had grandchildren, and I think now you even have great-grandchildren.
Yes. Well, it was one of the most difficult times to get through in my whole life, which, obviously half of my life was spent in there. I was convicted on hearsay testimony of convicted drug dealers. There was no drugs at all in my case that they brought up. I couldn't even dispute some of the testimony because they wouldn't give names, dates, and places, which is what the conspiracy laws are about. You're defending something that you can't defend because they don't give you enough information to have an alibi. They don't have no proof except for somebody that got arrested and wants to get half time. Mm-hmm. It was difficult to watch a parade of convicted drug dealers come in, many who I never even knew or met, but they were there to get their time off. So that's what mattered to them.
During the trial, you mean? The trial?
Yes, during the trial.
Right. So they had multiple charges and prior convictions, but yet they were testifying against you, and I guess there weren't drugs seized or anything. Was this another dry drug conspiracy for you at least?
Yes.
And they got caught, but they were offered deals, and then they just took the witness stand, and then all the focus was on you because you went to trial.
Yes, yeah. And the reason why I went to trial was because their main witness was saying that he gave me 84 kilos of methamphetamine, and I've only met him twice, and it had nothing to do with him giving me 84 kilos of meth. So my thing has always been, charge me for something I'm guilty of, and then I'll accept my responsibility. But, I can't admit to something that I didn't do, and that's why I took it to trial on that basis. And they started off with me, huh?
I can honestly say you and I had the exact same mindset because they were wanting me to admit to a laundry list of things, and I went around and collected money. And I said, look, I will admit to what I did, but I'm not going to admit to what I didn't do. So I completely relate to what you've just said. So continue.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was a mockery to justice. I mean, their main witness asked me to marry him before he testified against me, and I didn't even know him like that. And the only advice my public defender had was marry him so he can't testify against you. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And it was in a letter that was sent to the jail from him. And later on, he said he was coaxed into doing that letter, or he was threatened to do the letter and asked me to marry him. It was crazy. And there was no drugs seized. Well, they caught me with 0.4 grams of methamphetamine on my person. No money, no drugs except for that, 0.4 grams. And it was attributed to me over $1 million worth of drugs and street value. And I couldn't even afford an attorney. I got a public defender appointed to me. So it was just like, well, can't you guys see what's going on here? Right. I'm not this big queen drug lord that you're trying to perceive me or, make me out to be. And I just couldn't understand. I was blown away. I just didn't, I thought justice would prevail. You know, there was one lady on the jury that was actually Native American. She opposed it. You know, she said not guilty. They came back with a hung jury, and the judge read them some case, I forgot which one it was, sent them back in to deliberate more. And when they came back with guilty, right after that, the Native lady got a hold of one of the attorneys of my co-defendant and wrote a statement on how she was threatened to say guilty because she was the one holding it up, when the jury itself was trying to make a deal with her. Well, we'll give you the girl if you give us the guys. And the head juror said, no, I want them all, you know. And she was diabetic. She started getting sick from her diabetes. And they told her that in this statement she wrote, that if she didn't say guilty, that the judge was going to throw her in jail, and she wasn't going to get what she needed for her diabetes, and she was going to die in jail.
Oh my God.
And she was an older lady. Yes.
I don't think people understand to what lengths they will go to win. And people may even question whether that happened, but I witnessed it firsthand. It's jury selection. They removed all minorities in Waco, Texas, and then they gave crazy reasons. Like there was an African-American bus driver, and they said, well, he just works part-time, and we don't think that people who work part-time are really committed. And what does he had a job. You don't even have to, it's just lunacy, the things that they say. And I totally believe that they threatened her because the judges were kind of part of the system of pressuring everybody into cooperating. I was told that I couldn't subpoena anybody because the judge would never approve to pay for that person to travel to Waco. And I said, well, you know, I have friends that would probably pay their own airfare that I worked with, you know, that I worked with in a business. And they still wouldn't even reach out to those people, my court-appointed attorney, and interrogate them and see if they came to Waco, what they might have to say. I had clients in a business. I had primetime promotions. So I completely believe what you're saying. And I just don't think the listeners really understand to what extent we have lost the right to our Sixth Amendment to go to trial.
Yes, yes.
How old were your children, LaVon, when you were arrested? How old were they?
My youngest, my son, was 9 years old, and then my middle daughter, 13, and then Clarissa, my oldest, was 17.
And you lost your mother and your father while you were in prison, correct?
Yes. Yeah, my mom fought for my freedom, you know, and helped me fight for my freedom until the day she died. You know, and I couldn't see her. I was trying to hang on to watch the day that I walked out of prison, because our hope was that Obama would, you know, grant me clemency and see the injustices, but that didn't happen, and that's what she was holding on for. And, you know, so I just had to tell my mom just like, well, now you're suffering too much. You know,
you did a video that would make everyone cry. If anyone wants to see the video of LaVon's mom, she's just pleading, and she starts crying in the video about how your dad died and how important it was for people to help bring you home so that she could see you again. And I'll tell you what, I don't know how anybody can watch that video without crying, just thinking about it, because she's crying and is so sincere too. She's a beautiful Lakota Sioux Native American woman who you can just tell by the way she presents herself, the way she measured her words and communicated, that she was very thoughtful about what she was saying. I'm so sorry you didn't have. I know Clarissa went to see her and be with her and try to take care of her in the final days, but that was something that you should have been able to be there by her bedside.
Yeah, that hurt me so bad not to be able to take care of my mom, you know.
I remember.
Oh, it was hard.
Levon, you have a poem on candoclemency.com that you wrote where you say lines like, "See what I see, downtrodden, addicted, and poor, evil drug dealers, victims of the war, a sacrifice, a facade for all to believe." You go on to say, "Stripped of a belief in justice, their lives the final sacrifice, doomed behind the razor wire of isolation, loneliness and despair." What does that mean? Can you explain what that?
I wrote that when I was sitting outside one day and I was just looking around me, you know, and it wasn't too long after I had gotten there. And I just seen so many women that were abused all their lives, you know, and drug addicts, just like I was, who just needed help, you know, and not being taken away from our kids and punished in such a severe way when we were just drug addicts trying to, you know, make ends meet or what have you. But there's just so much pain and suffering in the prison systems, not only emotionally, you know, because of, you know, where we're being put, but because our children, you know, are suffering, our families are suffering, you know, and it's a burden that we carry because I see my mom and my children suffer because of me, you know, and what I made choices of in my life, you know, and I mean, my life right now, I want to dedicate to helping prisoners bring awareness to the injustices, the treatment, the inhumane conditions of prisons. I mean, it's horrific. And I never fathomed having to go through what I did, you know, or anybody to have to go through what I did in there, but there's still women sitting behind bars going through that.
Well, we're going to help bring more women home, Levon, and I look forward. Hopefully, we're going to see each other this weekend. We'll put our heads together, and we're going to fight to bring more people home, including some of the women you left behind that are true to your, you know, like in your heart.
Yes, you know, South Dakota is a very prejudicial state for Native Americans. We're 5% of the population and over 90% of the prison population. You know, and I think that's something that has gone unnoticed. You know, yes, Black lives matter, all lives matter. You know, Native American lives matter, but we seem to be forgotten people.
Levon Roach, I appreciate you coming on our program. We're out of time, but if you have any other poetry you'd like to share with us or read on air, we'd love to hear it. Beautiful stuff, and so glad you're home. So thank you, Amy, and thank you for what you're doing here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love you, Amy.
Bye. Talk to you soon.
Check out candoclemency.com, folks, for more information about how you can get involved with what Amy Pova is doing at candoclemency.com.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's